All right, I will call the meeting to order at 7:07 on Monday, August 7th, 2023. To begin, we have some consent agenda items. We have some co-curricular staffing recommendations, and we have some personnel items unnecessary for a vote. So I would look for a motion to approve the consent agenda items as presented.
I can make that.
I can second that.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Megan. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And we apparently still have no public comment for this evening.
We have not received any public comment prior to the meeting. If you'd like me to ask the members of the public, that'd be great.
Please do.
Okay. If you'd like to make a public appearance by speaking to the board, please utilize the Q&A portion found at the bottom of your Zoom window. In the Q&A, we would ask that you type your name, address, subject of interest, and whether you have discussed this item prior to the meeting with either the district administrator or President Howery. After submitting the information, we would take a brief break from the live stream to verify that the video and audio connections are operating, and then we will transfer you over to speak to the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie.
Registered to speak.
Okay, having done that, there's no need to read the bit, so we'll move on to informational items, led off by annual seclusion and restraint report. Lauren, the floor is yours.
Fantastic. I'm just going to hand out an item to each of you. I'll do my best not to trip.
Yeah, don't do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so in front of you, the first couple pages of this packet are informational about the state law around seclusion and restraint. And so, while I won't read all of it to you, I think the important part to note is when we talk about physical restraint, we are talking about when a staff member is physically restricting or immobilizing the ability of a student to move freely on their own. So either their torso, their arms, their head, or their legs. And when we talk about seclusion, we're talking about the confinement of a student apart from other students in a room or area from which the student is physically prevented from leaving. And the important note for seclusion is that it can't happen anywhere. The room has to be free of any objects or fixtures that could cause injury, and there can't be any locks on the door. And that is a change with this new updated law, and the law, I call it updated, but it was updated in 2019. You used to be able to seclude a student in any room by just removing everyone else, and you could prevent them from leaving. And if we were to do that now, that would be an illegal seclusion. They really want that child in a room that has no other items in it. The door can't lock, and right, for a variety of safety reasons for that child. And so just an important piece to note, that is a change, and it is sometimes a hard change to grasp when you think about it in practice, because if you have a student in a room who is highly dysregulated and you move the other kids out, you can't prevent that child from leaving. And so often we then have to use a physical restraint, which feels more invasive than preventing that child from leaving. So just to keep that in mind. When we use a physical restraint or seclusion, it really is that student's behavior is presenting a clear and imminent risk of safety to themselves or others. So it is by far our last resort. We try not to use it. The other requirements that have been changed is if a student has an IEP and has been secluded or restrained, the second time that that occurs in a school year, the IEP team has to meet and talk through what positive behavior interventions we can be using, what can we do differently to try to prevent incident of seclusion restraint from happening again. The other piece that has been updated is our reporting and notification requirements. One of them being this report. You'll see, has more information than just the numbers of seclusion or restraint that occurred this year. It really breaks it down further. The other piece is the parent reporting. We have to report incidents of seclusion and restraint within 1 business day to the family. And then within 3 business days, actually present them with the report. So they get the seclusion restraint report for their records, and that includes all the information: student's name, date and time the incident occurred, what led up to the incident, how long it lasted, who was involved, and that we always send to a family within those 3 days. And I will say, we have 1 business day to let families know. It is almost always that we are letting them know that day that occurred. That is a pretty large incident to happen at school, that they are pretty much notified, I would say, within hours of that happening, and in some cases, while it's happening, we are already communicating with the families. Training requirements, so not everyone can use seclusion restraint. We use nonviolent crisis intervention, or NVCI. We have 2 in-district trainers, and so every year they train our staff and do updates. We have 110 staff district-wide who are trained in NVCI, including our school resource officer for the first time, and almost all of our administrators are trained in NVCI. 3/4 of that 110 number are either our special ed staff or our student services staff who are frequently responding to incidences. All right. Any general questions about reporting or the law before I get into our specific numbers? Okay.
So I do have one question.
Yeah.
Lauren. What's not considered physical restraint? That briefly touching a student's arm, hand, shoulder, or back to calm, comfort, or redirect the pupil is not considered physical restraint. Is there confusion about that? Like sometimes we'll hear, as a teacher, I can't even touch the kid. And that's not accurate.
Correct.
Really.
Right. We do get a lot of questions on that. It
Yes.
is a frequent phone call I get at least a handful of times in September is, like, can you talk me through this? We may have a student who needs a little bit extra help transitioning, and so they're like, oh, well, she wants to hold my hand. Is that a restraint? I'm like, no, that is okay. I always say, if you are physically holding any part of a child and you wouldn't let them go, that's a restraint. Anytime that, if they give you a little bit of pull and say, like, I don't want this physical contact, and you let them go, that's not a restraint. So I think that's an important part, because I think there is some confusion on it
Good
sometimes.
clarification, though.
Yeah.
That's excellent.
All right. So the next few pages you'll see are broken down by multiple factors. And I'm not going to read all of the numbers here for you, but I want to just talk through kind of the general categories. So the first one is just the number of incidences of seclusion that happen in our buildings. And you'll see these charts include WEVA. WEVA is part of our district. And you will also know WEVA has not used seclusion or restraint at all last year, which I think is not a surprise. But I will say they are actually looking to have some of their staff members trained in NVCI for this year because they do some in-person testing. So that is a change that they would like to make, to have someone there just in case. You'll also note that I listed 2 additional schools, Common Threads and Richardson School, where we have students currently placed there. They are alternative schools specific for children with disabilities. When the resident district, or when we aren't able to provide them their free and appropriate public education, where they might need a little bit more. So you may see in the upcoming years, sometimes we'll have them listed, sometimes we won't. We have students currently placed at both schools, which is why they're in our report, and then we have to report on any incidences of seclusion or restraint that happens at either of those schools.
Where are they located?
Both of them are located on the east side of Madison now, within, I would say, a mile of the airport.
Okay.
So they're fairly close.
Close,
So do they have to report from Common Threads or Richardson School if it's a McFarland student that was
Yes.
involved? Okay. it's
Yes,
just
they
McFarland
report
students.
it to us. We get from both schools, we'll get a written report of what
Okay.
occurred that day, so it meets our requirements here.
Yep.
So the first box there is the incidences of seclusion that happened. The second one is the total number of students who were involved in the incidents of seclusion this year. And then it continues to break down further. So number of students with disabilities who were involved in incidences of seclusion, the number of incidents of seclusion that involved law enforcement. And that one is a change from last year to this year. Those are numbers that now we have to report to the state. So that's why you see the addition of law enforcement. The next one is just the number of students who are involved in incidences of seclusion that involve law enforcement. And then again, number of students with disabilities involved in incidences of seclusion that involve law enforcement. And then it goes,
Lauren,
yeah.
The part with law enforcement, that just means that they were present, correct? It doesn't mean they were involved in initiating the seclusion?
It
or-
means that we called them. So it wouldn't mean, say, if we were secluding a student and Officer Zietzma happened to walk by, we wouldn't consider that law enforcement involved. It would be if we actually reached out to law enforcement seeking their assistance.
So
That's,
they were present at our request?
Yes.
But may or may not have been
yes.
leading? any of
Correct.
the-
And I would say for the most part, when we call law enforcement, they do a really nice job of taking our direction. They don't have to, right? When we call in the police, they can take over. When we've had to call, they usually look for our guidance because, as you can imagine, when an incident of seclusion or restraint is happening, it is a very sensitive time, and they don't often want to jump in to escalate the situation even more. So that, it has been a good partnership in that way.
So Lauren, when you refer to law enforcement, are you referring strictly to our school resource officer? or
Not
be-
necessarily.
Something beyond him?
Yes, so most of the time, it would be Officer Zietzma. There are a handful of times, right, he is not in district, and so we'd have to reach out to anyone, member of the McFarland Police Department, and so it could include them as well.
Okay.
And all of those names would be in those reports for the family to see. It would list the specific officer that was involved. The next pages are about physical restraint. So you'll see the number of incidences of physical restraint, followed by the total number of students who were involved in a physical restraint, then the number of students with disabilities involved, the number of physical restraints that involve law enforcement, the total number of students who are involved that involve law enforcement, total number of students who are involved with disabilities who are involved in a physical restraint that involve law enforcement. And then the last one is just our total incidences of physical restraint or seclusion. And so all of those are broken down. But you have a secondary single sheet that tracks the number of incidences of seclusion restraint by building over the years. And Erin and I had been talking, our total district numbers this year are very low. Like our total incidences were just 57, which were including seclusion and restraint, which you'll see minus 2021, which we were not in school full-time. We have not had numbers that low. And, I was trying to brainstorm of why that could be. And we had a few changes for this year, which involved, we have a student services coordinator. She is in the buildings regularly and can do a lot more consulting and just be on site and kind of brainstorm when a student is having a concern and think differently about their programming. We also have a district autism consultant that we have worked very closely with, and she will come in upon our request and help us just think a little bit differently of how we can change kids' environments. And I think the change in the law of having the IEP teams meet after the second incident also really brings to the forefront, what do we have to do different so the student can be successful in school. So I think all of those pieces have really helped bring those numbers down. And all of our staff really do a nice job really looking for ways to prevent incidences of seclusion restraint in our buildings, because it is a highly emotional time, not only for the students, but all of the staff involved as well.
When did they start that? That after the second incident, they had to? How long has that been going for?
Since 2019.
19, okay. Wow, that is a great idea.
I agree.
Could you say the first reason that you thought this, student coordinator?
We have a
services
student
coordinator?
services coordinator. Her name's Angie Burnett. She is new, she was new to the position last year. It actually was a position I held before I was hired as the director, and I had not filled it in my time yet. And so I filled it for the first time last year, and I think that has been beneficial to have someone else on site that knows special ed very well.
Is she located in the high school? Or does
She is
she's-
in the district office, and then she has a schedule where she goes to each building one
Rotates.
day a week and
Yeah,
spends pretty much half of her day
Excellent.
there.
Yeah, that's great.
I did notice that there was a big, enormous jump from last year to this year up at Conrad Albion. You know, from 31 seclusions to 1 and 38 to 6. Was there any specific reason for that?
Well, I do think it's important to note sometimes, right, that that multiple incidences can be around 1 or 2 students.
That was gonna
And-
be my next point, is that there's never an equal number of students and
Correct.
incidents. That
Correct.
There's, multiple, several incidents as opposed to just one.
Yes. And when we see numbers like that, it tells me that we have not quite figured out the right programming for a student, and, we have to make some adjustments
Yeah.
on what that looks like.
And I love that attitude and that philosophy. Yeah, it's not that the student has failed, but we have failed the students.
Right. We just haven't quite figured it out yet.
Yeah.
The other thing that we find sometimes is that the work that you have done in one year isn't seen
Mhm.
during that year. It's
Sure.
sort of, it's a work in progress, and the difference of 1 year for a student developmentally is pretty tremendous. And so
Yeah.
sometimes it pays off for the next people down the line, and they should come back and thank you.
Well, that's what I looked at. I was looking at, is there a trend? Does it start going from building to building? But it doesn't at all. So obviously what you're saying makes real sense.
Is there any data about how we compare with our, similar districts?
So all of these are reported, so every district has to report them to the state. I don't know if I have seen a comparison. I'm sure, right, all of, you could go into each board meeting to see what the numbers were, but I have not seen a comparison. All I know that, the information that is regularly sent out by the Department of Public Instruction is our students with disabilities are secluded and restrained at a higher rate than their non-disabled peers. Like that is
That makes sense.
across the board. And there is pretty regular talk from the federal government about not passing legislation so that schools are no longer able to seclude or restrain students anymore. That has not passed, but it is frequently in the news of what they would like to look at because of the disproportionate amount of students with disabilities that are secluded or restrained.
Yeah, it's almost, it's the vast majority of the incidences that we have to report. Yeah, I also liked specifically the word you chose, like when a student's dysregulated, because I think that really helps show where the root cause is, right? So, yeah, to Tom's point, it's great.
Lauren, is there any significant trend going on by gender or ethnicity?
I haven't tracked it, Tom, but knowing the students, because, I could, no. It has been kind of across the board. I think, the consistent factor is our students with disabilities, but I don't think I could say it was higher males than females or a specific race over
Okay.
another one.
Thanks.
Anybody have any other questions, or?
I have a comment.
comments?
It was
You have
excellent.
thorough data here. Thank you.
Is
You're
that neat to
welcome.
see from
Very
14 to 15?
appreciative.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's nice to see over time. And I will say, Tom, that was thanks to you. I think in my very first year, you said to me, it would be nice to see it over time. And I went, yes, it would. And we've just kept it up all the
Yep.
years, so. Yeah, so thank you for that.
Sure.
We appreciate it very much.
Yeah, thank you
We
very much,
appreciate you.
Lauren.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren.
Can I just ask one question? Are all your staffing needs filled for the coming fall?
I just interviewed 2 more people today. We are looking for 3 more special ed assistants. Nope, 2 more special ed assistants, 1 at Indian Mountain, 1 at Waukesha. And then we will be.
That's
full.
it?
Wow.
And we have
Fantastic.
candidates.
And we have candidates, yeah.
That's great.
So we're getting close.
Yes.
Okay, then, moving on, we are going to have Mr. Tarnitzer give us a discussion piece on the facilities renaming proposed timeline and process. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so, wait, on the mic. So coming back to the board, just a refresher, and for the wide audience out there, we had discussed this at our last board meeting and had some discussion about some recommendations for some alternate timelines, maybe a little more detail to the proposal that I came to you with for discussion last time for the considerations of whether or not Conrad Alvian Primary School should be renamed. And so I came forward with just a couple ideas, but know that those aren't the only ideas. And this is really just, it's meant to be a discussion. The board doesn't need to take action on this. I'm just looking for, your insight and your ideas on a timeline. One of the things to think about is when we want to start the process and how quickly we want to move through the process. One of the considerations that I think we need to think about is we want this process to be thorough and to really involve the community. And so in order to do that, that requires intention and focus. And at the same time that we're going to be undertaking this work, we're also, there's kind of 2 other things that I would bring to mind for the board to note. That we will be engaging the community in a conversation as we consider a potential operational referendum for April. The other thing that it wasn't top of mind until a conversation today is that we are going to restart our Human Growth and Development Committee. That's a committee that had really paused for many, many years. And really, per board policy, we need to get that group back together to review our Human Growth and Development curriculum. That's a committee similar to this committee that has pretty clear indications about the composition of that group. It cannot be, in fact, that one is very specific in state statute that no more than 20% of the group can be comprised of various groups, including staff and different other representatives. So my point just being, we're going to be asking a lot from our community to be engaged, so keep that in mind. The proposals that I have here, really just what I tried to do is to simplify it for you just for conversation. The first one is what I brought to you last time with a little more detail, finishing by October. So kind of starting basically in October and finishing about that same time, a year later, with 2 separate sets of decisions. The first, in all of these proposals, the first decision is whether or not Conrad Alvian should be renamed. The second decision is, if so, what might that name be? So the second may not happen. The board could decide we feel that we want to leave the name as is, and then the process ends there. The difference in the two proposals is pretty simple. It's really about whether the group meets once a month or twice a month.
Yeah.
I just try to keep it simple for you to discuss, but the other option, of course, that is on the table is delaying the initiating of the process. For example, the board could say, we have community engagement efforts that we're going to undertake with this referendum and human growth and development, and we want to start the timeline later in the year. The other thing I will point out to the board, which may or may not be relevant to you, is that with the April election, it's possible we may have a new board or new members of our board. It's possible it'll be the same wonderful 5 of you. So however that falls, I want the board to think about that too in the discussion. So that's just kind of the overview, but now I wanted to open it up to the board for reactions, discussion, other ideas.
Can I just ask a question? What's going to happen, let's say the November 23rd, 2023, excuse me, April 2024, the 2 hours, the 6 meetings? Are people going to be literally assigned things to research? Are there going to be how's that going to be done? Is a historian going to come in? I mean, what happens at that?
Yes, both of those things. I anticipate.
Okay.
I anticipate that members of the committee will do some work on their own, but I actually more so anticipate we'll be bringing people in
Okay.
to share with the committee.
Good.
So that the committee members will be learners together.
Yeah.
But it's very possible that we may have a member of the committee that has particular expertise, and we wouldn't want to
Yeah.
to not utilize them. But I do want to make sure that we get as much factual information as we can get
Good.
versus what one person Googled,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's my feeling.
which is probably relevant, but not conclusive.
Yeah.
And I think that brings up a good point, Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
I think even before we can vote on whether or not we want to do this, we ourselves have to become educated.
Yes,
Because all I have is what was shared at a board meeting by a student.
yep. And that's where I see the responsibility of that committee, is to do a lot of the work of understanding, listening, learning. It's a very flexible process, so it could be maybe partway through, the committee wants to come and advise the board and say, here's updated information, here's what we have so far. There could be periodic check-ins with the board, or it could be more of a presentation. The other thing that is built into the process is that there will be opportunities for broader community engagement, so that it's not just this committee that is responsible for everything. They may, ask a question of the community, share some information. We could have listening sessions. There's a lot of ways to do it based on what we find.
My question is, how can we as a board make an informed decision whether or not even to do all that without us being educated with almost a lot of that information prior to October? Because otherwise, our decision.
This October or next October?
Well, either one.
Yeah.
But either way, if we don't have some of that background information, we may be making a misinformed decision.
Yeah, and that's the committee's responsibility, is to make sure that you have all the information that they have, and how they came to the recommendation that they did.
But aren't we, as a board, going to vote first on whether or not we want to pursue renaming Conrad Williams School?
Correct.
I think that's
But I
based
think
on the
that's-
input of the committee, though.
Yeah, I think that's for, we would
Oh.
be voting on that before.
Right.
Okay,
Yes.
so that's after all that.
Convened.
Okay.
Yeah, so the committee would,
Yep.
yes,
Next April.
sorry if I wasn't clear. The committee would meet, gather as much information as they could, whether that's from the community, historians, and then come to the board with a recommendation for whether or not the school should be renamed. And then the board can do anything. They can say, you know what, we need more information, or, we appreciate their recommendation, we agree, we disagree. Yep. So there'll be times in there, and the board really has the say in the direction. This is a process that is decided by you. You could decide, well, not today, but you could put it on the agenda for a future meeting to say, we do or do not want to rename the school. I mean, the board really has that authority.
Am I correct in, I thought I recalled by policy, it's my responsibility to appoint the leadership of this committee?
Yeah, so the way our policy reads is that with an citizen advisory committee, which this would be, that the board president appoints a chair from the lay people, so not from a district staff member. Now, what
right.
I will say, in practicality, that person's going to rely on district staff to help navigate the situation because, you know, it certainly is a lot for one person to do, so.
One question I have about the timelines. The whole process in the two options that you've given are both started and completed in the same school year. If there was part of it done over the summer, what would that involve? Would it be easier? Would it be more difficult? What kind of impact would that have?
I don't think much, I don't think it'd have much at all.
Other than the staff wouldn't be here.
And I think that some of these participants may have a harder time. You know, there's a lot of summer vacations and things like that, so if you're doing it in the summer, you may have less community input or
Yeah,
committee
that's what I was wondering,
input.
what
That's
you
a
guys,
good point.
what you all might think
And I
about
would
that.
be, because of the makeup of the committee, I'd be less concerned about the staff because they will have a minimal role in the committee.
And historically speaking, staff have come back for things even
Right,
if they
they're-
aren't under
They,
contract.
like
And
I said,
chances are it
they
might
may be
just-
more available, actually.
Yeah, and it might be just, I mean, if it were over the summer, it might just be 1 or 2 meetings over the summer.
Yeah, there's
Okay.
flexibility. Yeah, good question.
I was asking because I think, I mean, are we at the discussion point of it? I mean, or do you guys
Sure.
have more
Yeah, this is
questions first?
discussion.
Yeah.
Because I think I do, the overlap with the operational referendum that we have on, you know, on the docket. While this is really important, and I want the community to feel that it's really important and that we are going to address these types of concerns in a timely manner, it also feels like the referendum is just a higher priority because of its, like, the sustainability of the schools.
I don't
You know?
believe there's any doubt about that.
Yeah, so I wonder if it's something that we start either in January or February, or even after the April election. And then we could still do a shorter timeline, because so that it's, you know, but just delay the start of it until after the referendum is settled. Just so that it's, you know, our resources are really going to what feels like the higher priority.
Okay, yeah, and I'll kind of play devil's advocate. For the 70% or thereof in our district, the people who don't have children, I think you said it best, Craig, this is gonna be a very emotional. I think it's really important we don't try to kind of slide this along. I think we be open and we deal with it. I think it makes sense what you're saying. I just kind of feel like there's already probably a group of people who would like to see this thing begin. And I just don't want people saying like, oh, they're trying to stonewall this or whatever.
Yeah, I can see
My
that being
feeling is, I like what you have here.
perception.
So,
Which option you like?
I like what he has here.
The first one or
Well,
the
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 first?
first one or
is
the
October
second?
24.
I'm sorry, yes, I do like the first option.
The first one has it concluding
Yeah.
in October, and the second one
Yeah.
has it concluding in May, this coming May.
I really
Yeah.
like option 2, because I think we can do the whole process within 7, 8, 9 months. We've done that before. But I certainly concur that as a board, we should prioritize what is our district needs the most. I think it's that referendum. You know, we can't be distracted by other things. We already will have to start the Human Growth and Development Committee anyway, right? Probably in the fall. So
Yes.
I would be in support of postponing a committee formation until after the referendum.
So you're saying we could do it in a shorter time frame than the full year, but start
Definitely
later?
here. Well, according to here, we start in October, I think. Under option 2? Yeah.
So
Start-
would you want to
Oops.
start in October, or would you want to wait till after the referendum?
Well, I'm moving this back a year.
Oh, okay.
So I would say 2024, 25.
Oh, I see,
Yeah.
I see. I mean, the other thing to think about, if we did start it later, is what work could we gather, you know, as within district personnel that would be there to advise the committee? I mean, it's not an active historical situation, right? So whatever facts we gather will be as accurate
Yep.
today, you know, anything, of course, learned after that. You know, that could be that we could, you know, do some work and gather some historical information that we could, when the committee meets, advise them instead of starting a committee and then gathering the
Right.
information. Does that make sense?
I like that.
Yeah, that's kind of, that kind of gets to your.
So would,
question.
I mean, I feel like the benefit of that would be that before we even move forward with this process, like Tom said, we gain some more information besides what was presented at the board meeting to determine how we'd like to move forward, if we'd like to move forward. So
And-
before we go out and ask the community to do a big commitment, right?
And this would give us a few months to do that.
We could bring that. Are you saying, Kate, that we would bring that back to the board before gathering the committee and then?
I think so. I think that's what I'm thinking might work best, because we can be doing that while we're moving forward with everything else, you know, the Human Growth and Development Committee and the referendum. But we're also still gathering information to determine how quickly we want to move forward with this. And then once that information's presented to us, maybe we have a better understanding of how quickly we want to do this. Or, as you had said, I mean, I know we've already said we'd like to move forward, but as a board, we may decide we have all the information we need at this time, too. So, I'm
Possibly.
just playing devil's advocate here, who knows?
Yeah.
But at least we would have some more information before we move forward. So I think if we're gonna postpone it, where I mean, I completely agree that that might be, so I can see what Bruce is saying, you know, you wanna do something, you don't wanna do nothing.
Right.
But we've got a lot going on, so that doing something may be just gathering the information versus actually forming the committee right now.
Yeah. Just, we're essentially adding these 3 priorities to what we need to do in the next upcoming so many months that we really didn't know about 6 months ago. So the things that 6 months ago we were planning on getting done up here, you know, the stuff with the strategic plan and, you know, all those sorts of things, they're just gonna be added onto this list of priorities as well, and these are all big things, you know, that are gonna take some time.
What are the 3 that you're?
I've got school name referendum and Human Growth and Development Committee,
Okay.
you know, startup. And that Human Growth and Development is no small undertaking either. How many years has it been probably since we've had that even?
You know, it's been in various forms, to be honest. I think it's been pre-COVID, certainly since a group met, but as Melissa Full and I were looking at the composition of that group, we really haven't had a committee that truly represented the various groups to the level that we really feel is necessary in order to advise the board. So, you know, I can't speak to before my time, but.
It's a decade at least.
Yeah, it used to be required to do every 3 years, and that was removed from the law. However, the composition is something that is very specific, dictated in the law, that I think is going to require a little more effort than what we've done in the past.
I just want to caution about overloading with important, high-priority type issues. And I don't want to give, short shift to any of them. These are all important things, but we can't lose sight of, what was in the background before that we need to get done too, in terms of strategic plan and 5-year, those sort of things. Just something to think about. I think either option is fine.
It's-
And the pros and cons, that's what they are. Being perceived as being more responsive is important to a degree, but it's not the most important thing. Perception isn't always reality. And, part of how they perceive we do our job is to make sure that everyone understands that we've got a grasp on all the things we need to have a grasp on. And then we've got to determine how quickly we want to get, start checking these things off the list. It's going to take time.
Aaron, I just have a side question. Do you anticipate any huge obstacles with the Human Growth and Development Committee?
Yes. I think there's kind of two things I would say to that. One is just getting the composition is going to be really important, and it needs to be done very thoughtfully. I think it's important that that committee represents a variety of viewpoints, and that takes time to do right. Because if you rush a process like that, you're not going to have the right people at the table. The other thing I would say is that, the topic is a very divisive issue politically right now. And the curriculum that we currently have in place, not everybody agrees with it. Of course, all families have the right to choose that their child not participate, and many do, and that will continue. I don't think there's any way to create a human growth and development curriculum that doesn't have that.
Is that inaccurate? There are many that opt to not?
Oh, I'd say a handful, but still in my mind, that's many. I mean,
Okay, all right.
enough that.
I just wanted to be clear that we don't have, 40% of the
Oh, gosh, no,
students
no,
opting
no,
out
no,
of it.
no, no, a handful. So I think getting to your point, composition of it will be important, and I think the topics will be controversial. There's just no doubt about that. So it's not something that can be, okay, we're gonna have one meeting and it's done, it's great, okay, thanks, everybody. That's not how this district wants to move
Right.
forward with these kind of things.
And do we know if the local churches offer an alternate Human Growth and Development curriculum?
I don't
workshop?
know, I don't know.
Because-
Clergy has participated in the group in
Because
the
Christ the King
past.
used to have an alternate curriculum.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I know that we have had clergy represented on the committee.
I think it's a great idea.
I think it's a requirement? Is that what we read in the policy?
There's a
last
list
year?
of people
Right,
that
like
need to be there.
statutory?
Just so that everyone knows, what our kids, it was the sexuality program, I don't know what grade it was, but Dan went both at the church and the public school.
What church
That's
is that?
interesting.
Christ the King,
But is there other churches going to be?
that I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to say, where do you draw the lines? Like, yeah, we got that church, so we're set, but that may not work either.
It's important that people have options and resources and are
Yes.
informed.
Yep.
That's the most important thing. No parent should be surprised at something that is taught as part of that curriculum, so.
Am I correct then? So we're debating in a way whether we would do the research, or the research would be presented to us first? Is that what you guys are implying? Or do we let this, that's why I like this option one, because I have faith that a committee could, I have a feeling, come to a consensus when it's done. And they could do the heavy lifting for us. And I don't mean that to be lazy. It gets back to exactly what you're saying, Craig.
Yeah.
We got a lot of things on our plate, and I don't think this is as important in some ways as the day-to-day running of the school. And we've got to make sure that the policies are in place, whatever. But I think it is extremely important. But at the same time, I don't see why we couldn't have a group of, citizen group do this work.
But I think one of the things is the timing of it, right? So if we started in October, we can do that, but then you're doing it alongside of other things.
What are we doing though? We're just hearing reports, basically.
I'm not talking about we, I'm talking about the community.
Oh,
So,
okay. You think it will distract them?
well, I don't know that I really have an opinion, but that's a possibility. These
Yeah.
are 3 hot topic items
Yeah.
that are all very divisive in ways.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Potentially-
right?
Potentially, yeah.
So I just think we have to be cognizant of that when we move forward with what we're asking of community members is like, who wants to participate in what? You can't ask, obviously people can't do both or everything, and we don't want to take away from one thing with another. That's,
And how
That's
much
pretty much it.
information the community can digest, right? And still have an informed decision.
Yeah.
One thought that I had when I was thinking about, we talked a lot last meeting about how to include, because so much of what we do is digital or, watching the videos, and we talked a lot about reaching the part of the community that might not have kids in the school district and also might not be as interested in the tech type stuff. And I asked Erin about the idea of including kind of just a high-level question on the ballot about the naming of CPS or renaming it or whatever, just to get a litmus test of
Interesting.
people's thoughts. I don't know. Did you find out if that was?
It's certainly something you could do. I think there's, considerations with that. Some of the things that come to mind is, if people don't have the information, how are they coming to that decision? Another thing would be if, you get this sort of advisory question out there, but then the board doesn't agree or chooses not
Correct.
Yeah.
Which is
follow
a-
that.
Yeah.
It's a delicate thing too, so
Yeah.
it's an interesting way to consider that, because, I think it's a fair point to say, when we do a survey out, you only get the people that respond to the survey, whereas if you're asking the people that vote, of course, you only get the people that vote, but it's definitely
It's a bigger
probably a
number.
broader group,
Yeah.
probably.
Well, and it could even be maybe then it's a question, not even about the specific topic, but, an opportunity about what's the best way to communicate with you,
Sure.
but, or something. I don't know. It just, it feels like because we have such high voter turnout, even in April elections, it feels like an opportunity to reach people that we have a hard time reaching.
I think without a doubt,
See,
that's the case, but
I still feel like though there's a high percentage that probably don't vote in the elections, that, I don't know if they would choose to be involved or not, but that don't vote. And then I also think, you're eliminating some of the people who maybe aren't legally able to vote or
That's true.
aren't of legal age to vote. If you think about who brought this to our attention, it's somebody who's not of legal voting age. So you don't want to exclude that group
True.
either.
But I think that we get that voice in other ways. And true for the people who might not be voting. Like, I feel like we have other opportunities for them. It felt like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I just question how much the average person knows about Conrad Elvia. And so then you're kind of voting on, this is they wanted to rename this thing. I would argue that, a student who's probably done some research on it knows probably a great deal more than the average person. That's not to say I agree with her, but my feeling is, that's where I think we need to have a committee. Find the work, present it, get it out there. We have the press, we have ways and then have that informed vote, that discussion. I don't know.
I think a lot of this discussion just leads us back around
Right.
to, we're really gonna have a lot of things on our plate, and I also believe it would be naive of us to think that any of these last 3 here would be anything less than divisive and controversial. You know, and when you add that to the mix, it just complicates things and generally stretches out timelines and such.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of passion on both sides of a topic, and I could see where that could, it's absolutely the case with the school renaming and the human growth and development.
Yeah.
And then you come around to the referendum that if we don't treat that as a top priority, things may change around here significantly in terms of what we're able to do. So regardless of the decisions we make, they've got to be thoughtful, and I think taking into consideration our entire body of what we're looking to do in the next year, year and a half.
Yeah.
But I like these, I like the way you laid out the proposals. And I think I'm just gonna take some time and think about it myself a little bit. What's our next step?
But before you,
Go ahead.
But do we agree that we should postpone the study of the renaming of the school by 1 year? Because that's a question that we should be answering.
I don't
That
think I
scares
agree
me a
with,
little.
I don't think I agree with postponing it a full year,
Mhm.
but I think I like Kate's idea of, you know, the delaying the start while there's some kind of, someone's gathering some information to give us a little bit more background before we engage the community, or the committee, I mean. Is that kind of what you were saying?
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Or maybe not.
Ish.
No, it is. It's just a matter of for how long. And I mean, I think maybe a year is too long, but the question is, when do you start the process? So, I mean, yes, somebody can, you know, a group can be gathering this information, I mean, really starting now. But then the question is, when do we start this process, right? And I mean, to me, I would think maybe the beginning of next year, which still goes along with, you know, we're gonna be in the midst of a lot of other things at the same time. But just starting to invite the district to participate and things like that, you know, maybe
Yeah.
it's still within the school year, but postpones it 3 or 4 months.
I think about
Yeah.
that time is gonna be when the referendum momentum is gonna have to get started. And Tom, were you on the board the last referendum? I can't,
I
I
must have
can't.
been.
I think so.
Oh, sure,
Yeah,
for
I
the
think you
building
would.
of county development and all that, yeah.
Yeah, and if you recall.
I was on the village board at that time.
Yeah. That's a fair amount of work. You know, in that board members need to be responsible to get out to question and answer, you know, to look and learn, and, you know, it is labor intensive to make sure that you've got a referendum for your district within your village. That's got to be the primary objective. And I think the time that you're talking about, you know, the beginning of next year is when it's really gonna start in earnest, talking to the community about the referendum.
And is that for sure thing, Aaron? That we
It's not
might-
100% for sure. I can't make that decision.
What are the odds that
you
it
can.
might be shifted to the fall election?
Very, very small. So it's
Okay.
very, very likely.
Okay.
It's not a
That's
for
all I
sure
have to
thing,
know.
though, yes.
No, I understand.
Because I think all the information
Yes.
we've reviewed with regards to that, part of the funding is for that next
Yeah.
school year.
Mhm.
So pushing it to the fall, I think, wouldn't be as helpful, right?
I just wanted to hear the answer.
Yeah,
Yes.
right.
You know,
Because if it was to be moved back till fall of '24, then we could pick this process up right now. The
Right.
renaming,
True,
so.
true.
Yeah, that's highly unlikely.
Okay, not to throw another potential wrench in it, the other thing to consider is that the village is also working to approve plans for the new community center,
Mhm.
which will likely have a financial impact on taxpayers.
Sure. when do they want to think of
And they'll be
adding
looking
that?
for community members to serve on those committees as well.
I think that might be mostly
Is it done? That could be done.
Yeah, like all the research and the plans are pretty much developed. It's really just the construction part. I think, I want to say it would be next year, like next
Like fall of
calendar
'24?
year. Yeah, maybe.
Okay, so that wouldn't be in competition with the
No, but
operational
some,
work,
but some
right?
of the financial impact might overlap.
Yeah,
So.
Yeah, because they'll have to
just
set
something
their budget,
Yeah. So something just to consider.
just as an aside.
Mhm.
Well, it doesn't seem like there's consensus. There's a lot of great ideas. I think it's fine for us to, think on it. We can revisit it. I can, start gathering some information, from available people, but convening the committee is really when the process starts in earnest.
I wonder how difficult it's gonna be really to develop enough information and to do enough research to get a pretty good feel for Conrad Albion. Like you said, you gotta do more in-depth than Google it. Well, I don't know that I know anything more in-depth than where Google gets their stuff. So I don't know that that's gonna, that part of the process, should take months and months and months. Now, I could be totally off
it would
base.
be
here.
interesting to see, I've questioned this now, whether or not Conrad Algam School is up for renaming in Madison.
Yeah. Well, it was on
Because
the list and
Not
it
pub-
didn't get
It
renamed,
didn't get
but
renamed, okay.
I also did not hear that it's off the list.
Okay,
But it was one that was on the initial list.
okay,
It's not officially in a renaming process right now.
okay.
They're doing about 4, aren't they?
They have done.
Yeah.
That's my
So-
recollection.
Erin, do you have an idea of how much time it might take someone who is well-versed in finding information like this to get some initial high-level information for the board?
For the
Like a
board?
couple hours, 5 hours?
Yeah,
don't know.
I think that's fair to say. I think it's important that, as part of this decision, that a broad perspective on Conrad Alvium is shared. That it's not just one part here or there, that as much as possible, it's just very factual and not, I mean, history is, of course, open to interpretation, but as much as possible, it's a broad portrayal of, this person and
Right.
their impact on society and decisions that were made. And
We all have many facets in our lives, and that's what
Right.
we have to look at, is which facet you're gonna focus on.
I think we can gather some information to see what the UW did with the Conrad LVM plaques or whatever, because they redid some things. So there, I think there's information out there. We just have to dovetail who's done what so far, what organizations.
This is maybe we should have further discussion. Why don't we all kind of roll it around a little bit and see if we come up with anything, and if you have any questions, you can touch base with me or Aaron. And Aaron, we need to make another time that we can
Sure.
move forward with at least this preliminary
So
discussion.
what is it that you want us to focus in on? Craig?
I don't understand the question.
You want us to think about the timeline for a potential committee?
Yeah, I think so, but I think we have even, general discussion, more general discussion. But I don't think that would really change whatever, the composition of the committee. I suppose we could, start looking for committee folks, but there's gonna be a lot of committees out there too.
Yeah, I think that the first question is when to start.
Yeah,
To me, that's
Yeah.
officially the committee.
Yeah.
That is the primary question.
would you like to have that question answered this evening?
Doesn't have to be.
Doesn't necessarily.
To play devil's advocate to myself.
I love this when you do that. This is really
With the
good.
Thistle running that article kind of recently, I know that has piqued the interest of certain
Yeah.
community
Yeah, it did.
members.
Okay.
So if we postpone it, you might lose that momentum of the people. I've had people come up to me saying they're interested in being on the committee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so to play devil's advocate to myself, there are people out there who read the article, but that the Thistle published and are interested in being part of
There
it.
you go.
Yeah,
People
I've
reading this
spoken-
Thistle.
Spoken to some folks too, and
Yeah, that's all.
they've either
Yeah.
been, yeah, I'd really love to, sink my teeth into this, or, oh, no. No, I'm very interested, but I want no part of it. That was what I got
Like
from
interested
the,
in the outcome,
yeah,
but not, gotcha, okay.
right.
Isn't that
They don't want to be to blame for it, whichever way it goes. And that's, it's going to be one of those issues. This board struggled during COVID with, roughly half of the people wanting to do one thing and half of the people another. And once you make a decision to do it, that doesn't always appease those that wanted to do it a different way.
Right.
So we're going to run into that, regardless of the decision we make on this. That's why these things are controversial, because people are going to feel one way or another, and just because a decision is made isn't going to necessarily change the mind of those folks that, if we choose not to rename it, there's going to be a faction that's going to be upset about it, and vice versa.
I guess I'm more optimistic that the more educated the community becomes, the more of a positive outcome we'll have, regardless of what our decision is.
Yeah.
Or
Because
more,
I think
or
it's
more
the-
supported outcome?
Yeah, because I think the lack of education is what is
Right.
out there right now.
I agree, Tom.
I mean, I'm not as educated as I should be.
I don't think any of us are.
But I
That's a great
certainly
circle
understand where
back.
you're coming from.
Yeah. Well, for the sake of time, why don't we move along a little bit for this evening, and then and like I say, roll it around, and I'm perfectly happy to talk to anybody about whatever comments or questions you've got. I can take them to Aaron as well as you can.
We could discuss this a little bit during the retreat, the board retreat, the timeline.
Very, very
That's a
good point.
great idea.
But let's put a time limit on it.
Yep,
Well,
Yeah.
for sure, but I think to kind
Yeah.
of hammer down thoughts.
that's a good idea.
And I think it's important to, for the people that are watching this live or later, if you have interest, please reach out to a board member, to me.
Absolutely.
Because this
Yep.
is, my concern is that I will become a historian, and that's not my strength. So I know there's some people that really have expertise and love to look into these things, dig into them, they know how to use the resources. Those are the people we need on the committee. The people that really love this information and love to dive into it, that's who we need. And it sounds like there may be some out there that are
Well, I think there are.
interested.
Oh, absolutely.
I just don't
We
know who they
definitely-
are, so that might be a good place to start.
No, I'd like to do that, Kate.
Okay.
All right.
Contact information can be found on the district website.
So we'll move along to the district administrator's report. Mr. Tarnitzer.
All right, so, wow, you guys are so lucky to have all my thoughts today. So wanted to just share a few things with you. The first thing I wanted to share was just a bit about some summer school. So a lot of facts I'm going to throw at you, but I think it's exciting to think. So our first, the first summer school session I'll talk about, and then we'll talk about Camp Kindergarten separately, because they're really two separate things, but are all part of summer school. So it was offered to students in entering grades 1 through 5 in June and July. And so for the first one there, we continue the same format that we used last year. So students are grouped by grade, and they rotate through reading, math, writing, related arts, and recess as a class group. So very academic focused, but with also some fun in there as well. And we did receive really helpful, informative feedback from parents last year, and we're able to make some adjustments like snack breaks as part of the schedule, some transition times, more clarity there. And we also, for this time, I think the first time maybe ever, had the problem of having too many McFarland teachers interested in teaching summer school.
Good.
So that is a great problem to have. So we were able to almost exclusively hire our existing district staff to teach in June and July. So that's a lot of consistency for our kids and our systems. They might not teach those same grade levels, but they're our staff, and I think that is wonderful. And I will say, in my opinion, that is partly the result of the structure of the day, and the consistency with what they're familiar with. So those sessions went really well. That's June 19th to 29th, and then July 10th to 20th. Had approximately 270 students in the June and 280 in the July session. You have 21 teachers plus many educational assistants supporting. So we're very grateful for the flexibility of those staff that were involved, very responsive to the students. Special thanks to Kelly Vetter, who acts as the summer school principal, and Corey Shefchek, who also being at Wabisa in the host school, supported students on a regular basis as well. Camp Kindergarten took place just over the past 2 weeks here, and so we had teachers working on practicing routines and procedures, so students are ready to start the year, families ready as well, knowing the procedures. I had approximately 130 students involved in that. So really exciting. 8 teachers.
Is that a pretty typical number?
Yes, yeah. It's a very popular program.
How
but
big is the class?
Not much bigger.
I was going to say,
No, I think it's in the 140s from what I remember.
that's great.
So nearly every student that we know of or that knew that they were going to be participating. Many of those students are involved in 4K as well, but this is their transition to Conrad Alveum. Really appreciative of the teachers that were involved. 8 teachers involved, two also teach in the afternoon, so there's the morning and the afternoon sessions, plus the educational assistants that were involved. Special thanks especially to Greg and Brooke for their leadership. They really view this as an opportunity to give a great first impression to our students and their families and get to know them, as you'll see in the photos I'm going to share.
You only get
soon.
one chance
Yeah, that's
to
right.
give that first impression.
That's right. Emily Broom, just a great job. She's our 4K coordinator and helps with that transition tremendously. Overall, Melissa does an excellent job coordinating both of these programs. Carly Cherrick, for the first time, stepped into the summer school coordinator role. So they work really well together, Melissa and Carly, in organizing these things. Thinking of the future, we've got band and orchestra lessons start kicking in at this time. They are kicked in at this time.
Right.
So that's important. We also have speed, power, and acceleration, and, kind of getting ready, ramped up to get started in August. So very successful summer school program. I think we have found a model that meets student and family needs and is attractive to staff to teach.
Would you anticipate it growing even more?
I do. Although I would say those numbers are really strong. We're just talking 270 kids, 280 kids involved in those sessions, grades 1 through 5. That's a large portion of those.
Do
those
any of the
students.
kids do both sessions?
Mhm,
Okay,
yes.
Okay, so.
Yes,
I wonder
many
what
do.
percentage.
Do you know what percentage of our kids in those grades that is? Like what percentage end up participating?
I don't know. I could do the math in my head, which is a little risky. Our classes are, 160 to 180,
Okay.
per grade level.
I can do that math.
So, well, whatever, yeah. What do you think
Erin,
that is?
do they have-
30%?
Are there interventionists during the summer? reading, math
We don't do
interventionists?
interventions in the summer, but we
Okay.
do, per se, all of the kids are really integrated into the summer school programming. There's no sort of pull-out, but there is support within classes and differentiated learning to make sure kids get what they need.
Because I think that's really important because of the summer slide. It's the struggling readers, the struggling math learners that slide the most.
Yep.
And I think it's really imperative that they receive the amount of support that's required during those summer sessions. Also, what does the structure of the day look like? Because I'm not familiar with that,
It's sort of, if you think of it, it's almost like a shortened school day.
okay? Like a
In the
half-day
sense
program?
that they, yeah, almost like a
Okay.
half-day program, because they have all of their content areas and related arts and recess. You know, so if you think about that, that would be something that would be part of a full day. I would say the difference is there's more hands-on, outside, you know, trying to, get a little more creative with what kids are engaged with. But I appreciate that connects with your first comment, really, which is the curriculum is designed to address academic needs in an enriching way. And then students have that opportunity in the afternoon to engage in other purely enrichment activities offered through MRAP, which continues to, the recreation program continues to expand their offerings. And so instead of saying, you have to choose a class between reading and cooking, it's more, this is
Yes.
what we're providing academically through our summer school program, but there's plenty of activities you can do in addition to that. So that's not competing with that and hopefully addressing the summer slide.
Yeah. It's interesting, it's sort of like compacting the day
Yes.
into a half day. I didn't get into any summer school classes this year, but I did previously. The whole tone, the culture of summer school, the atmosphere, the attitudes, motivation by staff and students is so different
It is.
than during the school year. On one hand, I think, how could we transform that type of setting, climate into the regular school year? Because during the summer, most of the kids are eager to be there, and I think they learn a lot. How can we transfer that to the school year? And we just have never been able to do that, and for a number of reasons, but.
Yes.
It's
yeah.
a different culture.
It is, but why can't we transfer that type of culture into the school year? Where we have more time with the kids, too. And maybe it comes down to standards and standardized testing and all that stuff that sometimes isn't
Gets in the
necessary.
way.
Yeah, I mean, there is a curriculum that we're,
Ah.
and standards we're expected to address, right? And there's less flexibility.
Yeah. But during the
For a
summer.
good reason.
During the summer, they're addressing standards also.
They are.
Yeah.
It's just, they have a lot more flexibility in how that
And the pacing is
gets,
different.
and the pacing is
Yes.
different. And certainly a half-day,
Certainly, yeah.
you're gonna get more engagement.
Mhm.
And I trust
And they've also-
that the attendance is generally good.
Yeah, I don't know,
You
you know,
have
I
vacations
mean,
and such, I imagine.
people
but-
do come and go a fair amount.
Because of vacations and
Sure.
all that.
Do we follow up with a survey from parents and stuff?
Mhm.
Because I'm sure they really do appreciate that. I think it's something that, and then my other question is there any thought of expanding, particularly I think of, the middle school, when we get the report about the, seclusions and that, I mean, it's just like, it's a difficult grade, or time of life, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, I would say to that, having been a middle school principal who helped try to gain interest from middle school students in summer school, it's rough.
It is rough. I
Yeah.
believe it's rough.
There really is, because they're able to be largely independent, it's a challenge to get
Yeah.
kids interested
I could see
in
that.
wanting to come. Now, engaged in the recreational programming
Yeah, that's right.
activities, but
That's
the
right.
academic part is just really
Yeah,
tough to motivate
yeah,
a middle schooler,
yeah.
It's a tough group.
period, and then to motivate them in the summer. Now, if everybody did it, then they would all do it. I think that's the thing, you gotta make it the thing to do.
No, but I think you made the point well. The rec
Yeah.
is part of summer school, and they're doing that That's the
I
age
wish.
to begin doing it.
I wish.
Got anything else? Any questions?
My only other comment is, I wish we could do more to help support students' mental health and well-being during the summer. Because we know they have issues during the school year. What happens during the summer months?
Yeah, that's kind of what my point was as
Mhm.
well, is there things we can do?
And there must be
Everyone's
something we can
academic.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, even if it's just, a weekly check-in or something.
Right.
But that's something where we just haven't found the answer yet.
You have any thoughts on that, Lauren?
I do. I do. I will say one of the nice things that we would have been able to do this summer, so we have different partnerships with mental health providers, right? We have a partnership with Common Threads. We have a partnership with Care Solace. We have a partnership with Psychotherapy of Wanakee. And this summer, we have been able to keep the therapist from the Psychotherapy Center of Wanakee, her appointments here in McFarland, so that the students are still able to access them and don't have to go all the way to Wanakee for them. They can just come to this building and then still receive their therapy sessions here. So that has been a nice addition for this summer that we haven't always been able to do.
Has there been good response to that?
Yes,
Sure
yep.
it is.
Every week she comes in and she has several appointments. And so it's also nice for the therapist. She actually lives in Stoughton, and so she doesn't have to drive all the way to Wanakee either. And she can see her clients here.
Yeah.
So
Well,
over
that's
the, over the course of summer, how many times would you see a typical client, do you think? It would be weekly or
Yes, like
bi-weekly?
she comes in weekly. And so I get a schedule just so that the office knows when they're coming in. And she usually sees 3 to 4 students per time she is in.
Are they but how often would one student see?
Weekly.
Weekly,
Usually
okay,
weekly.
okay. Well, that's a good start.
Will we continue that
Yes.
next year?
Yes.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Mhm.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Our community partnerships have been really nice as an added layer of providing more intensive services
Yeah.
than what our student services team members
I think
can
people are
provide.
just more aware of the depth of mental health problems and issues there are now to kids where you never, at an age that you never even considered it in the past.
Oh, for sure.
So, I think the district's doing as good a job as we can in terms of hiring staff. I know we picked up 5 additional student support folks. It's gonna be difficult to get as many as we probably need, but I really applaud the efforts that this district is making in terms of at least trying to get some kind of a feel for how bad the mental health issues are.
Craig, I appreciate you asking the question for Lauren, because this is new information for me.
Yeah.
So thanks for being here to answer that.
Well, and we've partnered with outside agencies. They've changed,
Yes,
but for, I don't know,
6 or 7 years.
6 or 7 years.
Maybe.
I knew that, I just wasn't sure about the summer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Opportunities.
it's a great question. I would say, where I struggle, and I have to say this, is that the district has a responsibility, but the schools cannot continue to be expected to fill the gap that's not occurring in the medical community. That these are specialized services that are beyond the scope of what districts can or should be expected to provide. And I think what Lauren shared is a good example of a partnership where you have outside providers that are partnering with the district as opposed to the district kind of being expected to have our student services staff to meet needs which are best met with professionals outside of the school.
I think it's also really an important note for some of our students who have more significant mental health concerns to have 2 different people, right? To have that outside mental health provider and not tie everything into the school. Because as you can imagine, some of those sessions are very hard, and then to associate that only with school can be really challenging for some of our students. Where we have seen that even with some of our providers who come here, our students asking for 4 sessions at the clinic as opposed to here. So having that option is also really nice.
It's understandable as well. Anything else?
In terms of recognitions, if
Yep.
we're ready to move on to that.
Yep.
Just thank you, President Howery, for coming and kicking off our administrative council. We had our kickoff meeting last week, went really well. You know, we've got quite a few new members of our team and worked really hard that day and have a great start as we go into another recognition, which is today was the first day that our building leadership teams have met. So the high school team met and other teams are meeting later this week to begin that kind of that heavy lifting. So really proud of our district leaders and grateful for all of those building leadership and teachers and administrators for, you know, doing a lot of heavy thinking and planning in the summer and in August so that we can move quickly during the school year. Another thing I thought was interesting is Lauren shared just some information about our health services for 2022 and 23, and just want to commend our amazing health services staff. I would say there's a few things in my time here that have really changed and kind of been totally different than when I started 16 years ago. Health services is definitely one of those. The expansion of the services provided and required to meet the medical needs. So last year, this does not included checks for students who are diabetic. There were 16,662 health office visits.
Wow.
That's a lot. That is just a lot. So, and that's recorded. So visits. So I was really excited about that, and I think that is something that has really made a difference, and that families feel really grateful for the care that their kids get.
That's that overlap again.
Yep.
between- Yeah, that's wonderful.
You know,
It's interesting you bring up that topic, Aaron, because I think, I don't know if it was Education Week this week or past week, but they talked about health services in the schools. Many parents presume that there's a full-time health provider in the schools. So what they're recommending is that all parents should be asking their principals what their health services look like in the schools.
Yeah,
And McFarland's well taken care of with that.
yeah, we really are. We're very, very fortunate.
Outstanding people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's what it takes. It's all about the people that you put in these positions. And I think we do a great job of it.
Yes, very proud of that. Also want to share some gratitude to the administrative team has really been bringing forward this idea of making sure that families have an opportunity to tell us how they would like their child's name pronounced. So saying a child's name correctly is so important for so many reasons. And through a lot of work on that administrative team, working with Michelle Eversole, that will be part of our online registration process where families can tell us how to say their child's first, last
It may
name.
seem like it's an insignificant thing, but I've had the honor of reading names at a couple of graduations, and I know that how much, especially grandmas and grandpas, appreciate the correct pronunciation and spelling and such of their student's name, and many came up afterwards and expressed that.
There's a software program out there.
It's getting harder and
that-
harder.
That teaches you how to pronounce all of these names.
Yep, and I would always check before I read them over the announcements for birthdays and things, because each family, some families, they have different interpretations of how to say the same name. You know, I come from Breinig territory, where I grew up, and there's a lot of Brunigs out there too, so
Yeah.
you don't want to get in the middle of those.
There's even
Right.
some options for, where you record yourself saying your name and then you link
Yes.
to it, like as part
Yeah.
of your email signature.
Yep.
So yeah, it's becoming, that's great that we're kind of on the leading edge of that
Yes.
because
Mhm.
it's becoming more popular in the kind of corporate world.
Long overdue, by the way.
Yes, I just thought you'd find that interesting.
Yes.
We also had a great meeting last week where we brought together high school student services and administration with WEVA high school administrators to kind of talk about how we can collaborate, work together, services that are offered, getting to understand all the offerings that WEVA provides through DCA and Insight. And so that was just a really important, long overdue meeting. A lot of great questions and collaboration that happened. So that was something that Dr. Cutler had thought would be a good idea, and we thought with the new high school team, it'd be a perfect opportunity. We've been working on a lot of policies this summer, so thank you to Lauren and Angie, who was mentioned earlier. Been working on attendance, bullying prevention work, the associate principals. We've been working on the behavior response protocols. So
It was such a
Great
pleasure
work.
meeting all of those people. That just,
Yeah.
standing in front of them, though, I felt myself getting older by the second.
yeah,
I mean, when I cast my gaze out there, and there's some young, remarkably talented people.
certainly.
And, I would ask that you make sure that they all stay here for a long time.
Yep. Yep. I will do so.
Thank
I will
you.
do my best. Do have some photos to share with you. These are pretty much all summer school photos, so
That's great.
you can see, I just love this picture.
I do too.
I've looked at it several times. I just think it's great. It just shows you how much he enjoys, the opportunity to connect with kids and at Camp Kindergarten, and how much they enjoy being around him. Just,
People get a real kick out of that Camp Kindergarten.
yeah, they do.
That's a neat name.
It's a great,
And
it's
actually,
important.
that program was started by teachers, kindergarten teachers,
Interesting.
years ago.
Well, it continues on, I tell you, that's not going anywhere. Some more that, the question of the day is something, if you follow social media, that was on, and what's your favorite season, fall or winter? And, somebody actually said winter there, I see.
Yeah, it's good.
As a superintendent, it's not my favorite season. Reading, another administrator there, you've got Mr. Shevchik reading with us.
And it went much beyond what the typical migraine would be. So I guess Paul Ackley, our athletic director, initiated a emergency action plan that we have here. And that's a specific process, step by step, to handle this particular situation in terms of getting medical personnel there and family, let know what was going on, et cetera. So I just wanted to commend Paul and the whole crew from that event. I know everything turned out extremely positive. It did turn out to be just an extremely difficult migraine. But the fact that they went the extra mile and took those extra steps was much appreciated by the other districts as well. So kudos.
And actually, did that take place in Stoughton or here? I thought it was Stoughton.
This is
I
the
thought-
first time
It was
hearing
the
about it.
Stoughton coach.
Yes,
I know it was the Stoughton coach.
right.
I just don't know.
I
if
thought
that's
you were
where
in
they're-
Stoughton when.
It could have been.
Yes, I think we should be cautious about people's private medical information, but I think it's important to note that we do have really thorough, well-planned, rehearsed protocols. And that's one thing, actually, Paul and I were just chatting the other day about some of the safety protocols for event planning.
All of that was in the newspaper.
Okay, all right, I just
Yeah,
want to make
it was.
sure.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
I just
to let you know.
Want to make sure.
Yeah.
But it is important to note, that is one of the things that Paul actually and Officer Zietsma go around each summer to all the facilities, review where's the AED, what are our protocols, the sheets that they hand out to coaches and
Yep.
to event staff. And so that is something we have to really be cognizant of. So other things, speaking of safety, we'll be doing a training with our administrative, beyond our administrative council, including assistants, other staff, will be engaged with the emergency services in the village and the police department in a safety exercise coming up that we're doing. We try to do those in the summer. We have this Thursday, there's a open house from 3 to 7 for families at Nelson's. So McFarland and Monona Grove families, an ice cream social, so.
This
some-
Thursday, you said?
This Thursday, yep. So some of us will be serving ice cream during that time, so that's something to look forward to.
Do you have to be a new bus driver to get an ice cream cone?
I know, yeah, no, I don't think so. Yeah, so drive a bus, you never know. Might have an opportunity
What
to
time
do
is that, Aaron?
It's 3 to 7. I will be there from 4 to 5. Like Lauren and I will be there from 4 to 5, yeah. Serving among other administrators will be serving hour-long shifts, so
Is it
please come.
reminiscent of your school drop-off dates before?
Yes, yes. Any
Ice
chance
cream.
to have ice cream, it always works. And then there's really, our next chance to get together will be on the 21st. There's not a ton happening between there that is board-worthy, but a lot of work being done. Then on the 23rd is our work session. Reminder that our new staff orientation is the 24th of August, and board members are welcome to attend that from about 8 to 8:30. It's a nice chance to give
Just down here,
give
right?
a wave. That will be at Wabisa
It'll be at Wabisa.
Yep.
Okay.
in the multipurpose
That's the
room.
24th, you said?
Yeah.
24th, yep. And that's in the McFarland minutes as well. And I'll stop there because there's many other things in that. So that concludes my report.
Excellent, thank you very much, sir. Moving on to action items, the first is action on second reading and adoption of policies 0100, definitions, 0175, association memberships, 2210, curriculum development, 2221, special observance days, 2430, district-sponsored clubs and activities, 3215, use of tobacco and nicotine by professional staff, 4215, use of tobacco and nicotine by support staff, 5330, administration of medical/emergency care, 5512, use of tobacco and nicotine by students, 7434, use of tobacco and nicotine on school premises, 7440, facility security, 8405, environmental health and safety program, 3112, board staff communications, 4112, board staff communications. Okay. So, that's the packet. I would look for a motion to adopt policies as put forward by administration.
Craig, I was just the one, I did talk to Aaron a little about this, the board staff communications, both
Mhm.
4112 and 3112.
Yes.
I know it says that the staff member should share concerns, the required board action, and shall remind, let's read this. Should a staff member share concerns that require the board member, action, the board member shall remind the staff member of the chain of command and direct them to, I think it should be contact the person in charge of the department. But I was just gonna say, having taught here for 30-something years, I was never really that aware of that chain of command. And I think it's not a bad idea. Again, Aaron, I think you've been such an exceptional superintendent. I'm not concerned about you, but I know there was a period where staff felt very much that, they kind of wanted it to end there. And they didn't feel comfortable then. They didn't know where to go. And I think it's important that we let them know that, if they've gone to finally all the way to Aaron and they haven't felt like they've had, an answer that really, or a question a statement that really answers the question they're looking for, then they should be able to go to the board.
Absolutely.
And I think we need to write that down. I think staff need to know that. I also think it's important, I like the fact that, an individual board member can do nothing.
Correct.
Right, so it's just really important. The board is gonna have to decide if they feel that's something that's worthy of consideration. And I just don't think it's really mentioned in there. That would be my only concern.
So I'm hearing that you don't have an issue with the chain of command.
No, not at all.
It's just that maybe staff isn't aware that once they've spoken, once they've gone through that chain of command, that
Yeah,
they're,
I mean, I
they
think.
can go ahead and contact the board member.
Right, there just was just a period there where it was very confusing, and I think a number of staff still are kind of not sure what's appropriate. So,
I
that'd be
haven't
the
got
only
it,
thing.
I haven't got it right in front of me. I thought we did kind of address that, didn't we?
So, yes, if you look in B, staff communications to the board, it talks about in there, the language that is there is, it says the purpose of this chain of command is to ensure that matters are resolved by those who are directly involved and responsible for addressing concerns. This procedure is not intended to deny any staff member the right to raise matters of concern regarding the district operations to the board through established procedures when no resolution is reached by administration. All staff members have the right to appeal any decision made by an administrative officer through approved procedures. So, it's in there. If there's a way to word it that, I look to the board if there's any direction in terms of.
Well, I guess the question I would have
Understand more
had,
clearly.
if I was a young teacher, I would say, who do I appeal to? Because I think what happened is they would appeal, they would make the appeal to one member. They'd say, well, have you talked to this person? They'd go back to it, and then that person would virtually stonewall it, and then they didn't feel like they ever got any kind of, satisfactory decision. I just think you need to make it a little clearer who you appeal to. If you have gone to the proper appeal, then you should go, I don't know why you wouldn't say, at that point, you could contact a board member, and the board will decide if it's something that's worthy of consideration.
Well, it is under the section of staff communications to the board, so maybe that's why because it's just referencing all staff communication to the board. But maybe maybe clarification in terms of scenarios, like when this policy is released. Because it feels like, are you also trying to address concerns about the staff really truly understanding under what circumstances it would be appropriate?
Yeah, I think I just don't think they fully understand, what they can do. And I know it's caused frustration in the past. I don't think it's an issue now. And that's, again, I commend, Mr. Tarnitzer. I just think but I think we have to look beyond Aaron as our superintendent. At some point, you could go through this whole process again, and let's hope it doesn't happen.
It's sort of like we used to do the quick trip, with a quick trip survey or something like that, where you would, have the board policy, give it to someone like a quick trip or whatever, and ask them what that meant to them. And I think what
Oh.
you're saying is, have some teachers read this and ask them how they're interpreting that.
That's a good point, Tom.
I do have a couple other things here also, but go ahead.
But that might be a way to do that, because
You just don't feel it's clear enough?
I don't. I think there are staff members who, were very concerned about this. This is an issue, and I've just heard that from members.
I like
So-
Tom's idea. I wonder if, wasn't there a policy that you did something similar? I think it was with language about, like racist terms or slurs when they're in documents or in teaching materials. Like, what if you offered something like that, more like guidance, where it's not actually in the policy, but guidance about
Oh.
when this is used and when it's not, or,
Yeah, administrative guidelines.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Would
We
that be
certainly
helpful?
can. But, the idea that I think is being proposed here is that this language, this revised language, because there's quite a bit
revised.
updated, the green, is all new language, maybe is shared with staff for feedback, get their input. Does this make sense to you? And then that could be brought back to the board maybe there's some revisions that come from that. I certainly, could reach out to leadership of the MFT, get their feedback on this. That hasn't been done, because this has been done over the summer.
Yeah.
We have to be careful about stretching the process out to such a degree that it becomes a monster, though. These policies, you can get caught up, in some of these specific groups of policies. There's really so many, and I think you could absolutely do that. If you really want to take the time to do that.
I would
Go
say
ahead.
that if you're going to do that, then it should be specific guidance, like if you feel your concerns were not addressed appropriately by your administration, then you
Have the right.
you have the right to go to the board president. So I don't think saying the board is a good idea, because I personally feel like in the past, things have happened where it's like specific groups go to specific board members. I know because they feel more comfortable, but I think we have to have a good chain of command. And so specifying who that may be is important, and I think that's the role of the board president, personally, to get those concerns and then bring them to the board.
I have no issue with that.
My only concern would be, again, is it possible that the one person can, take a stand that the other four wouldn't necessarily agree with?
Well, I mean, I think that's the responsibility that we're trusting in the board president to bring these concerns to the board. And I think in general, like just removing this from the school atmosphere and just in general in the workplace, there is obviously a chain of command. And if those things aren't addressed, then there is always somebody you go to, but you can't, I don't want to use the word pick and choose, but I think you need specificity on what to do. So if we're going to make a change, I would have the preference of clarifying who that is. And as us nominating a board president, their role in this is to bring things to the board.
Well, that's our chain of command,
Right.
to go
True.
through the board president. What I was referring to before was the quick trip test. Do you remember that?
Yep.
Yeah. Do you have more information, Bruce?
No, I feel this is not an issue now. It was an issue. And my concern is that
You keep it from becoming.
we don't ever want it to be. And I think, I don't know. I was telling Aaron, when I taught here, if someone would have told me what's your chain of command, I probably could have figured out, but I never felt like I had to go to this specific person. I could talk to whoever. And
Did you find yourself going to board members often?
I never did in all my years, but I had board members come to me. And
Sure.
we just chat about things.
Yeah.
And I think that's good. I never had a problem with that. I expected, okay, I talked with so-and-so and like, now I got this is solved. But at least I felt it was good to ventilate. I think it's healthy. And I think it's good to have that relationship. And at the same time, I do think there are times when teachers can be really frustrated. And they go through the proper chain of command, and they're still not getting the answers they're looking for.
Yeah.
I don't know why you wouldn't sit there and say, well, then go to the board. There's 5 of them. You have to have 3 of them agree. If they don't, we came to the conclusion we don't think it's an issue, or we agree with you. It needs to be. I think in some ways, it kind of is a part of our American checks and balances. In that sense, in a small way, I guess it's a check on Aaron's power, but I'd rather not think of Aaron, but the superintendent's power. So that you never lose that kind of relationship that you're looking for between your staff and your administration.
I agree.
Again, I don't think it's a problem now, but when I read this, I'm going like, I don't know if the average teacher is going to figure out, I shouldn't say that. Certainly a beginning teacher is going to really know, what do I do now? And I do know that there have been times in the past, this is even before I was on the board, where you had people just say, we just feel like if someone wants to stonewall it, they can. And we have no recourse. And I don't think the results of that has been good.
I agree with both of you.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Bruce, but I also agree with you, Kate. I think we have to have a central point of contact on the board for an initial, the initial contact, I think, has to be probably to me.
The only argument I'd have that, though, again, is you have a very special relationship with the superintendent, and it's very possible that would be the end of it. I don't want to, I'm thinking maybe as a, like, typically, when you're proposing these rules, like the founding father, you're thinking of all the possibilities. I would say that if they come to us, it could be stated here, and we must report to the board president. Because then we're at least
And vice
aware what's
versa.
going on. And then, if you want to make that decision, so
Sure.
be it.
Well, I think personally, if someone comes to the board president, I feel like it would then be, like, each issue should be shared with the entire board.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
don't think it would be, like, I don't.
You would hope,
I
yeah.
I would hope that the president would
Okay.
share it out so that any of us would get that information, but we could make that more clear and create, and say both of that, like, it should be the board president that the person contacts. If it's not, the board, whichever board member is contacted is required to report, to the rest of the board.
I think that makes it's very important. I think that's a good point.
Either way, it sounds like maybe this one needs more revision, right? So we could pull it out of the motion?
Yes.
Or this one and the other one that
And have
deals with it?
another
Yeah.
revision.
So I agree. I mean, it's an important one. If it's not clear to people, then we should, yeah.
First of all, I want to say that the revised policy is so much better than the former policy. You know?
I agree.
But when I've heard, some teachers say they can't talk to the board members, and they say, where did that come from? Well, from the principal. That's a huge issue, And again, I don't know if that's still happening right now, but with the revisions here, it talks about differentiating, teacher wants to just share information, that's fine. If they want action, they have to go through the channels, chain of command. But the suggestion I have is under B, staff and communication to the board, both policies really, 4112 and 3112, both titled Board Staff Communication. They talk about failure to do so, failure to follow the chain of command may result in employee discipline. I think that's pretty threatening. And to me, it puts me down, it puts me, I'm not going to say anything if I'm going to have to be disciplined. We really don't need that in there, because if they don't follow board policy, there's consequences anyway. We don't have that clause in any of the other policies, that clause. That if they fail to follow board policy, there may be employee discipline.
You say that should just be the assumption?
That should be the assumption. Or put it in more of the board policies that are out there. Why do we target this one policy to have that phrase in there?
What do you think?
It's not consistent.
Mr. Tarnitzer?
Well, Tom and I have talked about this.
Yeah.
And I think that it's clear, it should be clear to staff that they are responsible for following all board policies. It should be clear to all of us. I think, is it threatening? I think that fact with all board policies is probably threatening, but we don't put that line in there. So I would hate for people to be, so afraid of talking to a board member that there's going to be employee discipline. Now, I do think that's not the culture of our district, so I don't think anybody, there's probably very few people that
Wouldn't
feel
have
that way.
happened thus far.
But policies are meant to be timeless and rather, so I'm fine. I mean, it's the board's certainly preference on that. That line could easily be left in or taken out.
Well, how about, for the sake of expediency, we pulled these two. Does anyone else have any issues with any of the other policies in this group?
Nope.
So I don't have a problem with pulling 3112 and 4112 out of the motion and just go ahead and move the rest of them along, if that's agreeable with you folks. So I would look for a motion of that ilk, if somebody could figure it out.
I move to approve the second reading and adoption of policies 0100, 0175, 2210, 2221, 2430, 3215, 4215, 5330, 5512, 7434, 7440, 8405, as recommended by administration.
Thank you. Kate, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Who got it?
I think Bruce.
Bruce, okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Just to-
Action,
I just want to make a note, just for the board, just to refresh your memory, that was a district-initiated policy change, so that wasn't part of the initial policy packet. So I think, this is our own timeline.
Yeah.
This is our policy.
Yep.
Just to be clear on that.
thank you. Action on Children at Risk Plan. I would look for a motion to approve it as forwarded.
You might want to hear it. Does Lauren have wisdom to share with us?
Thank you, Lauren.
Yes, you give me twice today.
That's lucky on us.
In the at-risk packet, there is not a lot of new information from previous years. So the plan on the whole has stayed very similar. And the state statute hasn't changed. So when we think of our students who are at risk of not graduating, there is specific state criteria. Now, I would also argue we don't wait until the students meet this criteria in order to take action and intervene. So in the packet on the first page is the actual definition. And so we're really looking at students in grades 5 through 12 who are at risk of not graduating high school because they are already dropouts or meet two or more of the following. So that would be 1 or more years behind their age group in the number of high school credits, 2 or more years behind their age group in basic skills, habitually truant, parents, adjudicated delinquents, 8th grade pupils who have scored in each subject area on the examinations administered under Section 118 and was below the basic level, and then a student who is a dropout, meaning they have ceased to attend school. So, right, it's very specific criteria, and we actually traditionally have less than 15 students district-wide who meet this criteria. So it's a very small number of students. However, our intervention and what we do to ensure that our students graduate from high school, we use for more than just those 15 students, right? And so what I passed out to you is the SST process. So that's our student support team. And each of our buildings, even though, as you saw, it's really focused on grades 5 through 12, we use this SST process in grades kindergarten through 12th grade. Could even argue we probably would use it at our 4K level if needed. We have not needed it yet, but it could be a process we use. And really, anyone can refer a student to the SST process. What I passed out to you is a flow chart. And what I like about this flow chart is it really outlines that there's multiple avenues. So, someone refers, we reach out to the family, and really try to figure out, do we need to develop a support plan, or is it something
Do these
more
referrals
going
come
on?
from their teachers?
Mainly, I would say it comes from the teachers. Sometimes it comes from parents. Sometimes it comes from our student services team members, right? They review data on a weekly basis, and so they may pull in a student to this process based on data they have reviewed. And the nice part of this plan is also it pulls in our child find obligations, right? So are we looking at a student with a disability? Is that why we're seeing that kind of non-engagement or lack of engagement in a variety of areas? And then, right, they either go through that special education or 504 evaluation process, or they develop a student support plan, then that's shared with all of the students' teachers and the people that they engage with. And that team kind of checks in regularly to update the plan, see how the student is doing, and then sometimes, right, they don't need that plan anymore, they're doing well in that
Do
plan.
you oversee this, do you oversee that group?
Each building has this group. So I would say the principals are typically the, oversee that group at their building level, but as a district, it is a process we use in each of the buildings that is very similar. The other thing to note is that our high school at-risk program offers a lot more options,
I
right?
bet.
And so we talk about different online classes that students can take. We don't typically like to put kids in the same class if they have not passed it for multiple years. So we look at different options, whether that's an online option. We have, it's not new, but it's newer to us, something called pass classes. So DPI developed actual paper coursework that students can go through if the computer tends to be an issue. So there's paper coursework for some classes that students can use. And then we also, for, I would say, a very small group of kids, have different options where they actually leave school. So if it's, they could do the GED through Madison College, and we can help them through that. And so there are just different options that you see outlined in here to try to meet the needs of all of our kids.
Well, it sounds like everybody's looking. You know, you've got several points of contact that any one of them can make a referral if they see issues.
Absolutely.
I have a question. What about the kids who maybe are meeting the academic standards? They're not truant, but they're having repeated behavior concerns. You know, I think we've seen in the past some kids come to us with those issues that maybe didn't get referred for evaluation for some needs. How are we helping those students that maybe don't hit the criteria you mentioned, but are having those repeated behavior concerns related to maybe ADHD or anxiety or things like that that are causing issues that could relate in suspensions and expulsions and things?
So typically, I would say each building even reviews their behavior referrals that come in, and it just depends on, right, the level of what's occurring throughout the building, because, we have a finite amount of time and the amount of kids who could come through the process. But I would say this is the important part of having everyone know they can refer a student to this process, where parents know that they can refer, where different teachers can. I mean, a student could refer themselves to this process, and we've had students refer themselves for a special education evaluation, and we would take that referral. We've had doctors reach out, and I think that's the important part, is that we don't want it to be only one small group of people trying to evaluate who all needs to be in evaluation for either SST, Special Education 504, because we know we would miss them. And that is the idea around Child Find, is that anyone could refer a student if they were worried or if something came up. I hope that answers your question, Kate.
Anybody got any other questions?
No, just another comment. It seems like we have unlimited options for kids, which is good, because kids are very complex. And no one model will fit the needs of all kids. So I appreciate the district and you, Lauren, continually to actively pursue what can we do to help support all kids. And I have one question. Erin, what is the graduation rate here at McFarland?
It's always in the upper 90s. I don't know what it was this year off the top of my head, but it's, typically 97, 98%.
Yeah, no, it's really high. What do we do with the other, like, 2 or 3 students that don't graduate?
Well, there's,
How-
not a lot.
Do they
that
just
we
drop out?
Can't, yes.
We don't find them and?
Yes,
okay.
I mean, there's so much that is done before they get to that point, where they don't graduate, that, we certainly have opportunities for students to, continue their coursework, but to be honest, when they get to that point as a senior, if they're not engaged, we've tried about everything.
And most
that we
don't
can
hang
have.
around.
No.
I
Beyond.
would also, I caution, when we think about our graduation rate too, one of the pieces that DPI, and I think it's federal legislation, our students who stay on in our 18 to 21 program are considered dropouts for us because they don't meet the graduation criteria in 4 years. So even though,
Yes.
so it's always a group that could make up a small percentage, but there is a group that factors in to that 3% that are considered non-graduates because they are staying on until age 21.
So they aren't counted as graduates at all, even when they reach 21.
Right, because it's a 4-year
Yeah.
graduation. That's how they track it.
Interesting.
Great question.
I have a follow-up to Kate's question, because I appreciate your answer about that we don't want it to be a small group of people, and we want really it to be an open process that anyone can refer when they feel like they need support. But I feel like maybe the breakdown in some of the examples that we've seen is that people are informed of the process who are, well, so that they know the process, right? So like what their options are, and that maybe that's, whether it's parents or staff or anything like that. That is feedback that I hear from other parents who aren't, they do think their child is struggling and they don't really know what the next step is. And so I wonder if there's some education piece about this to both staff and parents or community, family members, that we should consider.
And we have a variety of communication that goes out around Child Find. Angie and I have the pleasantry of every August sending out a box holder mailing to everyone that explains the Child Find, and there's, even for our 3-year-olds, right, like a survey that they can take, and then there's additional information that gets sent out for our older students of who to contact if you have a concern. And right, not every concern leads to a special education evaluation, but sometimes it just leads to different conversations. And our school psychologists at each of our buildings do a really nice job communicating with our families when they reach out. We have many families that I think reach out regularly that says, I got this, I received this doctor's report, or I had my child did a neuropsych. Can you just walk me through what they mean? But I think we can always send out additional communication. But anytime a parent would even question you, I would always say, like, well, there's a school psychologist in each building, and that should be their first contact. That could be a person that can just walk them through all of the different options that they could have in that building.
Well, and I think yes, and I think maybe even part of it is that there might be an expectation that parents feel like it is the school's responsibility to report or to keep.
I suspect that probably is the case.
But like maybe an unreasonable expectation, right? Like, because we can't watch everybody, and so, but they feel like it should be happening. So maybe there's even a piece to remind people that if you're concerned, you reach out.
I agree. I think that it would be great if parents were on top of it and reached out when they had concerns, but I think sometimes what happens is parents have the expectation that if there's issues, right, or if staff members, teachers are concerned about something and they feel like this is the right direction, that they know they can refer to. And I don't know even, and I might be misspeaking when I say this, but based on what I've seen with some previous situations, I don't know that even staff is aware that when there's things that they're seeing as a common theme, where they're sending out emails, or the AP is sending out emails regarding a specific student and behaviors, that like this should have already been part of the process. And that's where I think maybe we're, is it solely on the teachers and the staff? Absolutely not. But sometimes I think if we're seeing that repeated communication about a specific student, that's when somebody needs to say, okay, do we have, what we need here to kind of move forward with a plan to get this child's behavior.
And I would say that is just something that as a district, we've noticed in a couple of situations of late. And so our commitment is to continue, we have to continually remind staff that when there's these concerns, to ask for help, as Lauren said. I think that's where the gap is, because we get new staff and even staff from other districts, that aren't as familiar with the support that we have. We're hopeful that with the new student services staff, that also provides more accessibility to people to bring, I'm not sure about this student, and the parent and I were talking, and that's where it's really gonna happen. I don't think, as much as we'd love for a parent to start by contacting the school psychologist, I think the first conversation often happens with the teacher. And so, that's something that, I know Lauren is very committed to, and we've talked about at great length.
Yeah.
It already happens almost all of the time. It needs to happen all of the time.
Well, I would say anytime, if a teacher reports that a parent is requesting this thing, it gets done.
Yeah, that's not optional.
But may not be true if a teacher just generates it.
Or
You
even
know?
if they're not just requesting, but that they've asked some, like what is the trigger for a staff to report it? Or to even put it on someone's radar,
It may be
Yeah.
different from one staff member to the next.
Right.
Well, it's really interesting, though, because of the expulsions that I've dealt with in the past, and you also, is that until a student crosses a line and there's a pivotal incident, you go back and find that. I mean, there's so many of the students that don't reach that pivotal incident, but their background behavioral history might be the same. So it's just by chance that this one crossed that line. So typically, there may not have been anything different that we would have done up to that point.
And I think, right, we're talking about students who are regularly changing. And so while it may be a particular student, didn't have any concerns for a long period of time, and then suddenly something happened one year, it's hard to know. And we have to be cautious, especially when we're talking about, is this a disability or is it not? Because we know the outcomes for our students with disabilities are also not great. And so we have to be mindful of over-labeling and while still identifying students that we need to identify.
It's a hard job.
It is.
It's a,
Well,
it's a
Holy
balance.
cow.
I mean, there's some, just from a healthcare perspective, there's so many kids who have a diagnosis that you may not even know about because we don't go to the school necessarily and say, here are the diagnoses. You rely on the family, right? And if
Is
we
there still
don't
a
know there's a
stigma?
problem until the family comes to us and says there's a problem. I mean, on occasion, the school will call, but there's just a lot of missing pieces, I think, to put the connection together, and it's a hard job. It's definitely a hard job. It's just, you want to try and get those kids that we can maybe intervene before. it
And
gets to the
unfortunately,
point where
sometimes I think that maybe parents believe there's more of a stigma attached, to having a special ed student or somebody on a special education plan or those kinds of things. And I don't know that there's any way that, you can do a whole lot about that if that's, the way they feel, it's the way they feel. And unfortunately, that's going to be to the detriment of the student most of the time, I would think.
Right.
It'd be ideal if we could provide all the services that are needed without labeling kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
That's
I
our
think we're all
goal.
in favor of not labeling kids, but
That's our
we have
goal.
to label them to get
I will
service.
say, with this plan that, Lauren's done an excellent job, overseeing and leading and making sure each building has the teams together and the processes. When individuals come from other districts and see what we are doing, I often have heard, it's amazing how no child gets missed in this district. We have kid meetings, we talk about kids together, we process, we seek advice from each other in a way that I think is something to be proud of. It's just there's always room to improve.
Is this flow chart new this year? Okay, it's really nice. I think it's nice for especially new staff to have too.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody have anything else?
No.
Lauren, once again, thank you. Thank you very much. I mean,
We do have a,
So Craig, can I make that motion? I move to approve the McFarland School District's 2023-24 Children at Risk Plan as presented.
thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you, Tom. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Action on school board virtual meeting format, virtual public comments. Aaron, do you want
I do.
to expand on?
So in May of 2022, the board voted to provide the residents of the McFarland School District the opportunity to review regularly scheduled board meetings, both in person and virtually. The board will accept public comments via individuals who are physically present at the board meeting, who are participating in the board meeting virtually, or who have sent an email to the board president or superintendent in advance of the meeting that they would like to be read to the board at its next regularly scheduled board meeting. What I'm bringing forward to your consideration is the idea of eliminating the section that says that public comments can be made by those who are participating in the board meeting virtually. And the rationale for this is when members of the community are participating virtually through our Zoom webinar feature, we have found, including at our last board meeting, that sometimes what they share is inappropriate. That they act as though they are a member of the public, hoping to share a concern or an observation, their comment with the board for legitimate purposes, and have, as we saw at the previous board meeting, displayed something very offensive and inappropriate. I will say that, you know, one of the things you don't see as board members is that in the webinar, there are frequent, very offensive comments, including the use of racial slurs by people we have no way of identifying. Now, those comments, the way that we have it set up, you know, typically are only seen by Angie, who is monitoring this. However, it's clearly unacceptable. The other thing to consider is that we haven't had people make a legitimate live virtual public comment in over a year. I mean, certainly in my time as superintendent. We did look into what some other districts are. So Angie took the initiative to reach out to districts in CISA 2. We heard back from 19 people, 19 districts.
Wow.
And of those 19 districts, 14 of them do not allow live virtual public comments. 5 do. Our village board does currently allow live virtual public comments. So I think there's some options for the board to consider, and maybe others I'm not thinking of. Of course, no change. You know, what was decided in May of 2022 can stay. Another option would be to remove live public comments being allowed, but make it clear in that people can submit not only via email and we'll read something, but if they want to submit a video of their public comment in advance, we could show that at a board meeting. So it would be them actually reading it as though they were present. Another idea would be to allow live virtual public comments, but require some level of pre-registration. We would do our best to vet that person in advance of the meeting. Although I will say there's not a way to 100% vet that someone has a legitimate concern to share with the board in advance. And of course, other ideas that the board is open to. I think there's really no way to prevent what happened during the meeting at the last board meeting without some sort of a change. But the board could decide, you know what, we understand that, but this, the risk is worth it to us.
Yeah, I don't know. At the end of this, it'll be 15 years for me, and that, I understand that in the past, it isn't either, they don't have the ability to do what happened, or the ability, it's much easier to make what happened happen nowadays, as opposed to you know, in the past, historically. You know, you wish that there were easier ways of doing, you know, if you could just have a delay, or if, I think the situation that happened with us was probably worst-case scenario, because there was a real name attached to a real address, and, you know, everything appeared to be perfectly legitimate, and I don't know there's any way for Angie or anyone else, you know, to plan for events like that. You know, your fingers can only move so quick, and I wish there was an easier way of going about it, but I would tend to defer maybe that to Angie. You know, who's got to do the work to make the changes that are necessary?
Well, I mean,
Or do we need to make changes? I guess that's the question that should be asked, based on, you know, history and what happened at our last meeting. What do you think?
I would think that remove live virtual public comments, but allow people to submit a video, then Angie doesn't have to police it quite so much. They have to submit a video that she obviously can see ahead of time. And it would be just like being here and giving a public comment, but it still provides the opportunity for people to provide a public comment via video. Because it's not like we can respond anyway, so they're not, whatever they want to say, they already know what they're going to say before they attend the meeting. So to me, that seems like a pretty easy way to minimize the work Angie has to do, but still accommodate people who maybe can't come to the board
Yeah.
meeting.
The only other thing I was thinking is, could you have a person could choose a designee who would speak for them? In other words, they're not capable of coming in, they're gonna have a neighbor read it. But the person's live anyway, so you're back in. So I like
Right.
what Kate says, but I think you could also say if you're not able to attend, someone could make that.
Sure.
Well, and I think the other consideration that I don't know that Aaron shared is that the technology that we're also switching to doesn't allow for some of the same capabilities, and what we're currently using is fairly expensive.
we were
So-
able to, that is no longer an issue.
Oh,
We're able
okay.
to make a deal currently.
So we're going to continue
Okay.
with Zoom?
Yes, we are
Okay.
able to continue with the Zoom webinar feature
Okay.
at a fiscally responsible
Is
rate.
that the preferred method?
Yes,
Zoom-
by
Zoom
far,
is the-
by far.
Is the top by a bunch, right?
Over the other.
Over their
option, right?
Over
competition.
Google Meet, yes.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't like taking options away from getting community engagement and community feedback. I don't know that a lot of people always have time to plan, you know, ahead. And we just talked about 3 very big issues that are probably gonna garner a lot of community feedback. That said, I like the pre-recorded video option, or, you know, the pre-registration. I don't know if the pre-recorded option would, like, if you have to screen the videos, is that gonna be more time than what you currently have to do?
I've done that prior during the COVID time. I definitely never threw a video on it, I have not.
Well, I mean, just how much would it add to what you know, to your workload, you know? I mean, they're supposed to be limited to, what is it?
I think I'll
3
get back
minutes?
to
3 minutes.
Angie.
Mhm.
Why don't, let Tom make his, and then I would like Angie to tell us how she
Yeah,
feels about
I
it.
guess I'll be a minority view here. I think we should do away with the virtual or the Zoom. If no one has used it in over a year, why try to have a hybrid of it? Yeah, if there's an issue that comes up over the next year that some of the community cannot communicate with us the way we have it set up, but then we can take a look at this again. But my view would be, let's do away with the Zoom altogether. All right, or even any pre-recorded, pre-videos that community might send in. Because there's some other options there. I mean, they can still talk to Craig
And
or
email
Aaron.
Yeah, they can still email.
You know?
I agree.
Angie, tell us what you're feeling about it, what you would like to see happen.
Well, it's certainly not my decision. Let's just start there.
No, but you defer to the people that are, most affected by it.
Sure, and I do appreciate that. I would say that either, offering an option for community members to provide a video along with the written comments, that certainly is a doable option for me. Also removing, the live public comment, if that was the decision, obviously, we can work with that as well. So either one, I'm not gonna weigh in more on either side of those,
That's fine.
I guess.
I appreciate it.
What we discussed today, and, one of the things is you don't want to make it more difficult for people. And, my opinion is that the technical capabilities that are required for someone to access the Zoom link, log into the Zoom, submit their name and address in the Q&A feature, turn their sound and video on through Zoom is probably more difficult than it is to record a video on a device and email it to us. So I don't think that we're necessarily going to be limiting people. It is what Megan references, just they have to plan in advance so that we get it in advance.
That's the way it used to be before we did
Sure.
this anyway. They still had to submit their
Right.
public comment by a certain time frame. So,
Quite honestly, that's the way it's always been until COVID.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't think we're taking away any rights.
Well, we did learn during COVID that there were a lot of people who appreciated the benefit of, and maybe would not have otherwise been able to
Yeah.
without these other options. And so I don't want to lose sight of that either, but I do think the pre-recorded option, I think we cover that.
Yeah.
honestly though, even during COVID, the majority of the comments were written comments.
Yep.
Yeah.
I can think of a
Vast
few
majority.
that were live, some that were pre-recorded, but the vast majority were just written comments.
We read a lot.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, videos almost preferred
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's true.
in that regard.
And that's easier to limit to stick to our policy
Right.
of the 3 minutes or,
Do we have consensus on the?
The only
I-
question,
I
we would
live
need a
with it.
motion.
I think, go ahead.
Oh, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I don't disagree with Tom either though, where,
Yeah.
you have the ability to submit a written comment through the website, or you have the ability to show up here and read your comment. And both of those allow you to either be present or not be present.
It's true.
And would very much limit, well, it's not gonna take away Angie's work, but it will limit her back and forth of doing things. So I
Yeah.
don't disagree. And maybe we don't do either, and we just say, we go back to the way we were doing things pre-COVID.
Yeah, and I suppose you could couch it in such a way that you try to make folks understand that if there was a way technologically to keep these sort of things from happening that's available to us, we would certainly do that. However,
Right.
those options just aren't out there for us right now, so we're gonna revert to our previous mode of communications. And I don't think I would feel too bad about that in terms of limiting folks' ability to communicate with us.
Craig, anyone who was watching that would agree. They'd say, get rid of it. That was so disgusting.
Yeah, yes.
It's
that's
just,
true.
I would prefer to
No one
not.
watching it would have seen
Yeah.
that. Or not.
And
but not live, but-
my understanding is there was no way that you could prevent it.
No.
So,
Right.
yeah,
Well,
Tom, I
So
think,
devil's advocate, though, if no one has used it and no one has submitted a video in so long, is there harm in leaving it in?
Well, the only use we have was last time.
Not live,
Oh,
but like
okay.
pre-recorded. No, not live. I'm on board with
Video,
that.
yeah, okay.
But like allowing video
Good.
submissions.
Oh, yeah.
If it's, as opposed to just getting rid of all of it.
I can live with that.
I can live with that.
Yeah.
Well, I would just say, in terms of workload, and Angie, correct me if I'm wrong, when email is sent in we also have to go through every word and preview that.
Yeah.
It's probably even faster to put on a video and,
Because we have a limit how long it's
Listen to
supposed to
that,
be,
yeah.
right?
I'm just saying, I don't think it's more work than an email. Is that fair to say?
I mean, I'm creating a slide, like a slide deck with,
Yeah,
and dropping it
there's
in.
those logistics.
Sometimes there's issues with converting, from going back to when we were getting them in
Technology,
COVID.
okay.
There were technology conversion issues where I could not
Okay.
easily get a certain file structure into, like a slide deck.
Or we couldn't hear, the
Or we
volume
couldn't
was
hear it.
weird.
True. Yeah.
Yeah, there were just
Good.
Sure.
technological issues more than anything else.
That's
Again,
fair.
I would just caution us when we talk about what's going to be easier, or it's going to be too much
True.
work, because we're criticized already for not doing some things because we don't have time or whatever it is, you know. So,
Are we in agreement? We're gonna go with the pre-recorded video?
We have to have a motion.
Do we have to
Yep.
make a motion?
I would accept the motion. Somebody, anybody? Pretty please?
I'll make a motion that we go with pre-recorded comments from the community for school board meetings in the future.
Thank you, Tom. Do I have a second?
I'll second
Can I
that.
ask a quick question?
Yeah,
Is that gonna?
Do we want to include written, though, as well?
Yeah. I
Written or
think so.
pre-recorded.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
what I would also say is that I think you probably in your motion should clarify that you are no longer allowing live virtual
I agree.
comments, just to be clear, because
Yeah.
you're saying you're allowing something, but you're not saying you're no longer
Discontinuing
allowing.
something.
Yeah, okay.
So it would be the second, in the,
Yeah.
the recommended motion, I think, remove live virtual public comments but allow videos, I think is the recommended language.
Oh, there it is.
That agreeable to you, Tom?
Certainly.
Okay.
Do you want me to read that then?
Yeah.
Please.
Why don't we read it?
If you moved, okay, let's see. All right, the motion will be, I move to allow public comments to be made by individuals who have sent a video to the board president or superintendent in advance of the meeting and indicating that they would like it to be shared at the next regularly scheduled board meeting, and to eliminate the ability of public comments to be made by individuals who are participating in the board meeting virtually. But I do think we need to put in there, don't we, that they can make the comment live, right?
No, they can't be
No,
live.
can't.
They
No, 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 but I mean, they can be
In
in person.
person.
Oh, correct, correct.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
that
I don't
already-
think that said that.
Could we, would anyone be comfortable if I have
Please.
a potential language here? So.
Do it.
It could be to allow public comments to be made via individuals in person or who have sent a video or written comments to the board president or superintendent in advance of the meeting and indicating that they would like to be shared at the next regularly scheduled board meeting, and to eliminate the ability of public comments to be made via individuals who are participating in the board meeting virtually. Sorry, I have it all
Well
typed
said.
in, just curious.
We like
Okay.
it.
All right.
I move that we accept Angie's language. I don't know.
Yeah, we're good. I've got a motion and I have a second. Are there any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0, and I look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll do that.
Bruce?
I will second.
Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0, and we are adjourned at 8:37.
9:37.
9:37.